Now, once we see what is, we are responsible and obligated to speak what we see, because that is an important part. It is a vital and necessary part of loving our neighbor. When I see what is, I have an obligation to speak what is. Once we come to know truth, we have to speak what is true, no matter how hard or difficult that may be. Paul speaks to this in his letter to the Ephesians in chapter 4. He says this: "We must no longer be children, tossed to and fro and blown about by every wind of doctrine or teaching, by people's trickery, by their craftiness in deceitful scheming." And that is so contemporary, isn't it? I mean, this describes our political, social, religious context in our country today. He says, "But speaking the truth in love, we must grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body is joined and knit together." Christ represents that which is just and good and right and fair and loving and compassionate. And as we speak the truth in love, Paul says this promotes the body's growth in building itself up in love. Speaking truth in love builds up the body in love. The body is the community. It is the community of faith. It can be the church. It can be a local community. It could be the nation. It could be our world. Speaking truth in love builds up the body in love. A story in chapter 3 of 1 Samuel is analogous to our contemporary situations. The story of when Samuel, as a young man, hears the voice of God for the first time. And the voice tells Samuel that the priest, the old priest Eli, with whom he was staying and serving in the temple, had failed to speak truth to his sons. And so judgment is going to fall on the whole house of Eli. Eli's sons were wicked. They had dealt with the people of Israel unjustly for their own gain and benefit. They had abused their power and authority. And Eli failed to speak truth to his sons. Eli failed to restrain his sons. And so, because Eli did not restrain them, the voice tells Samuel that judgment will fall on the house of Eli. The house of Eli will come to an end. Samuel, who is a young man, is a bit fearful, afraid to speak this truth to Eli, but nevertheless, he does. He speaks this hard truth to the priest Eli. We have to speak hard truth right now about the condition of our country, because our democracy has been stretched to the limits and is in real peril and will be in peril for months and years to come. This president, who will soon be out of office, rode a wave that began years ago. He came into prominence by popularizing a conspiracy theory about President Obama's birth, claiming that he was an illegitimate president. He tapped into this racism that is still prevalent in our country. He solidified several fringe groups courted by the Republican Party for years. He did not start this wave, but he rode this wave. And he empowered the wave. He consolidated the wave. And that wave has not yet run its course. I heard last night that a recent national poll said that 75% or 74% of the Republican Party believe Biden was elected illegitimately. It's hard to imagine. 74%, millions of people no longer believe in democracy. They do not believe that this election was safe and secure. They believe the election was stolen. Now, I've heard other polls where it's in the 60s, but 60 to 70 plus percent. Hard to imagine. The president has had both enablers and supporters in high places of government across the country. And there are those who, like Eli, knew better, but have remained silent. They have enabled the injustices of this president. They have stood by in silence as he systematically plundered our democratic institutions and norms. And there are others who believe the lie. There are others who wholeheartedly support this president and have advanced this false narrative. And both the supporters and the enablers are culpable and responsible for where we are today. And sisters and brothers, we will be responsible too if we remain silent and we refuse to speak what is. I was passing by the television the other evening, and the local news was on. And I didn't get the whole story, but they were showing some film of a minister in Louisville praying in what looked like a fairly large congregation, without mask, of course. But what gave me pause, what stopped me in my tracks, was what I heard. He was praying that those who stole this election from the president would be brought to justice. He was passionately praying this lie, this delusion. And apparently there were other ministers in the city who were upset, and I suppose that this created some conflict, and that's why this made news. But this minister really does believe the election was rigged and stolen. And even though this president will be out of office tomorrow, this is Tuesday, January the 19th, these people are still going to be here. The 60 to 75% of Republicans, millions of people who believe this big lie, who believe the delusion, they're still going to be here. And many of these folks are our family and friends and co-workers and acquaintances, and they're still going to be here. The leaders in Congress who spread and propagated and supported this delusion are still going to be here. The Christian leaders, like this minister, are still going to be here. The social media, the so-called news outlets that told this lie over and over and over again, and the conspiracy theories that support the lie, They're still going to be here. We have to speak what is. We have to tell the truth. Speaking the truth in love in this context, as Paul says, where false teaching is tossed to and fro, where through deceitful scheming and trickery, the delusion is propagated. We have to speak the truth in love in order that the body can be built up in love. Both Bonhoeffer and MLK emphasized that all it takes for injustice to engulf a nation and for evil to pervade a society is for a good people to be silent, to say nothing and do nothing. But what I wonder is if a person knows the truth and does not speak the truth, can that person still be described as good? Can a good person be complicit and culpable in injustice and remain a good person? It's not enough to see what is. We must speak what is. It's not enough to know the truth. We must speak the truth and do the truth. Because as James says in his little epistle, faith without works is not faith at all. Faith without works is dead.